Oh no, language paper 2, question 4. Have no fear, Mr. B is here. Welcome back to the channel. Your guide here, Mr. B, to walk you through everything English and how to crush those essays. Now, today we're going to be working our way through language paper 2, question 4, the real humdinger on the paper. But fear not, we're going to break it down together, and by the end it'll be as easy as pie. Before we get into it, please remember to smash that like button, hit subscribe and tap on the notification bell so you never miss out on any of this great content. So where are we going in the video today? Today we're going to be taking you through the journey of this question. Everything from how to write an amazing thesis statement, understanding what the question is about. Of course, in Mr. B style, I'm going to show you some killer responses to give you a lovely model, and stick around to the end to find out how not to fall into those AQA pitfalls. Okay, grab yourself a pen, maybe a cuppa, and let's dive right in. Okay, so what is question 4 really asking us to do? Well, it's asking us to do 4 things. Let's dive right in. The first thing is to identify the different perspectives and viewpoints on the topic. This is a question about perspectives and viewpoints. The second thing is to compare the different perspectives. So we have to identify and also compare. And when we're talking about comparing, as we've said in previous videos, it's about synthesis, bringing those two texts together, bringing those two perspectives together as well. Number 3 is comparing the methods, how the writers use those methods to convey those perspectives. And that's something that's often forgotten or lost in this question. They forget that this is a methods question. No, we still need to be thinking about the language, the structure, the tone, anything that the writer does to create effect. And finally, support your ideas with quotations from both texts. Now the good news is year 11 and year 10, AQA tell us this in the bullet points underneath the question, as you'll soon see. We've looked at the question, and now let's break down what we should be doing in the opening of our response. We want to cement our opening and anchor our essay with a lovely thesis statement. And to do that well, I want us to think about including 4 things in our thesis statement. The first thing is making it clear to the examiner that we know what the topic is. Is the topic about marriages? Is the topic about boats? Is the topic about camping? As we've seen in the previous extract, we looked at camping. So if you can make it clear from the beginning that both writers discuss, for example, the experience of camping, you've underpinned the topic and you've got the first thing right. Moving on. What is their perspective on the topic? Do they feel angry about camping? Do they feel excited about camping? Do they feel frustrated with camping? So again, being able to pin that down, identify that, and talk about that in your thesis statement is going to get you onto a winner. Moving on, number 3. It's about the tone. Now the tone is about the emotion. It's about the feeling. And when we think about the way in which we speak and the tone in which we use, I can be quite angry in my tone. I can be quite sarcastic in my tone. And you get that by the way in which I adjust my voice. But when writers create the tone, they do that with their words. And so you have to be able to identify, based on the language they've used, what that tone is. Are they being sarcastic or are they being angry based on the language that they use? And finally, the message. What do they want us to walk away thinking about? What do they want us to learn? What do they want us to go away and take into the world? So let's have a look at that thesis statement. So in your thesis, like we've already said, we want this to underpin your response. And to make this really, really clear, we want to identify 4 things and be able to explain that for both of the articles. So the first thing we want to explain is the topic, the perspective, the tone, and then the message. And I think the easiest way to exemplify this is to have a look at an example through a tweet. So let's have a look at this tweet here. I briefly forgot about climate-related doom scrolling and how live streams and constant video updates from floods and hurricanes are normal now. So from this, you should be able to figure out what the topic is. And if you'd like, you can pause the video and see if you can figure out what the topic is. So, the topic is clearly about climate change. And from this, we should be able to figure out the perspective. What is the speaker's point of view? And clearly from the way in which she's written it and what she says, her perspective is that climate change is a disaster which seems to have been normalized. What we also want to identify through this is the tone and how she is using the language to express her thoughts and feelings. And this tone here clearly seems to be one that's quite humorous, quite sarcastic. Now, you could also argue here that she seems quite scathing, that she seems quite critical, and that would also be good and valid. And finally, what could be the message that she's trying to teach the audience here? What could she be trying to get us to take away from it? And arguably, that more needs to be done for climate change. So that really, hopefully, is a framework for you to use to help you create that thesis statement. And you do this for both sources. Right, let's jump into the question. So now refer to both source A and source B. Compare how the writers convey their different attitudes to homelessness. In your answer, you should compare the different attitudes, compare the methods they use to convey their attitudes, and support your ideas with quotations from both texts. Now, in this instance, this question is asking for you to do a few things. The first thing there is to compare, and you must talk about both sources if you want to receive the full marks. The second thing I want to draw your attention to is this word here, attitudes. Now, attitudes can relate to quite a few things. The attitudes could be the perspective, the attitude could be the tone, the attitude could be the viewpoint. And sometimes that framing or the wording can just be interchangeable. Now it says compare the different attitudes. Most of the time they'll give you two sources with very different attitudes towards the topic, whether that's one thinks it has a positive attitude towards camping or one has a negative attitude towards camping. They'll usually be different. Notice it says here in the bullet point that you must compare the methods as well, the words, the phrases, the imagery. But as well as that, things like the structure of the piece and more importantly, the tone that the writer uses for those higher level methods. And finally, ensuring that you use those quotations from both texts if you want to get the maximum marks. So there's the question, gang. Let's move on. So we've got our question here, and let's have a look at how we might bring that together into a plan. So your plan might begin with showing that you have that thesis statement, a simple similarity or differences between the two sources. Does the perspective change? This provides the anchor to your answer. Then, as we finish our thesis, we think about what we're going to be talking about as those big ideas from source A and source B. And as you can see here, writer A clearly feels, and you have a sense of what their perspective is. Explaining that, you give us a lovely quotation. Her use of, and you give us the method, primarily shows something. Similarly, writer B's experience of blah blah blah, the topic, leaves him imagining that, whatever that perspective is, evident through the use of. And again, don't feel afraid to use those methods. And you repeat that same process with another big idea. Okay, so let's have a look at a killer response. And we call this a killer response because this is the one that is written by AQA and is on the AQA mark scheme. And this is a top band response. Now, what I'd like you to do now is pause the video and read the example response. And while you're reading, I want you to pay attention to the colors on the left-hand side and the skills descriptors that correspond with those. Okay, so we've read it now, and what I want to do is draw attention to a few specific parts of the response and what makes this response excellent. So, the first thing you want to notice is the amount of consistent flitting between the two, the constant reference to source A and source B. But not only is it doing that, it's constantly synthesizing, bringing those texts together as we have already said. The second thing that this thing does really well, the use of the methods. Now, as we look at this example, the onomatopoeic word throbbing describes the rhythmic drumming of the engine as a constant repeated heartbeat. Notice how the use of the method itself links to the meaning. The sound of the onomatopoeia mimics the heartbeat, and so they haven't found methods that are airy-fairy or methods that are tangentially linked. No, it's very specifically linked to the task, and that's what makes this incredibly useful. Also notice the use of those quotations. They are short and embedded. Become complacent, hourly expecting, under the tumult was peace. Always short, always concise, and that's again what makes this detailed and perceptive. Now I want us to ask ourselves, is this a good response? Now you can pause the video and rewind and have a look at the previous model example. Have a think to yourself, what's good about this response, and are there any areas that could be improved? And the way in which you're going to decide that is by having a look at the mark scheme on the previous slide. Now let's have a look at this one. Now this one does many of those good things as well. It's constantly flitting between the two sources A and B, and we can also see a very clear synthesis in this response as well. It's detailed and it's developed. Later in source A, Haydock focuses on the conditions of sleeping rough and shows she has little experience of this, as she has a duvet at home and a roof overhead. Haydock focuses on the soggy cardboard and conditions and horrible weather to build sympathy for the homeless of Leeds, and she becomes more concerned as the text goes on. So here, lots of short embedded quotations used to support your responses, and that's what elevates this response. So here we see a response that could be improved, mainly because there really isn't enough focus here on the methods and how the methods link to meaning. Okay, so this is why we stayed, for those pitfalls. And let's have a look at some of the common mistakes that I regularly see my year 11s make, my year 10s make in their mocks and in the real thing. The first big pitfall is failing to respond to both texts. You are going to cap yourself if you fail to talk about both texts. It says that in order to get above level 2, you must do this, so do not make that fatal error. The second thing is failing to follow the steer of the question. Again, if the question is asking you to talk about the perspectives on a particular topic, ensure that you do that, consistently returning back to it. And this is why I say at the beginning, it's absolutely crucial that you find out what the topic is. Thirdly, forgetting about the methods. Often, the young people, as they're writing their essay, go on about the evaluation, but forget about the methods. They forget to talk about the writer using words, phrases, similes, whatever. Don't forget it, guys. And finally, time. What you don't want to do is get into debt. You don't want to get into debt on the paper, and you don't want to get in debt in real life. But what we often see happen is kids spend too long on question number 3, and then they are in debt for question number 4, and they end up spending too long on question number 4 and don't leave themselves enough time for question number 5. So be really disciplined in the exam, spend no more than 20 minutes on this question, and give yourself enough time to really smash question 5. And there you have it, folks, a surefire way to crush English language paper 2, question 4. Remember, it's all about understanding the question, developing a strong thesis statement, and presenting a clear and well-structured response. Practice makes permanent, so keep at it. If you enjoyed the video, Please don't forget to smash the like button, hit subscribe, and tap on that notification bell so that you never miss out on any amazing content. Leave a comment below if you have any questions or suggestions about future episodes. I've been Mr. B. This has been English Essentials.